Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome back to the Onyx Tavern Vlog series on Shuriken Sentai Ninninger. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, and today we're going to be discussing Shinobi number 4, Elephant Appears, Paonmaru. Now, stop me if you've heard this story before. The Red Ranger is young and arrogant, thinks he can stop all the villains by himself, but by the end of the episode learns teamwork. I've just described the entire plot of Shinobi number 4 for you, as well as probably about 15 previous Sentai and Power Rangers episodes in the last 20 years. I hate to say it, but this episode, once again, is repeating old tropes that we have seen, exact storylines, but put into a different context. I mean, how many times have we actually seen where a Red Ranger, whether it's in Power Rangers or Sentai, thinks they can do everything by themselves, but they have to learn to work together as a team. Where the Red Ranger is hot-headed, he goes in, and he's able to do everything by himself, but has to learn the value of teamwork. I mean, it's really hard to kind of hate on this plot because it's a decent story, and it's a very good moral lesson, but the fact is, we've heard it so many times in the last 20, 30 years that I'm really thinking we need to kind of move on from here, where it needs to be a different story. Now, can you teach stories about teamwork? Yes, you can go ahead and do it, but in the context that they're doing, again, Red Ranger character, young, headstrong, needs the others by the end of the episode. Again, it's the story old as Sentai, basically. And that takes a few strikes off of this episode. But I will say a few interesting things about it, which doesn't really save it or make it completely unique, but helps us understand it a little bit more. So, Takaharu, and actually let's talk about the opening teaser scene, because it actually gives some insight to a couple of things. First of all, the opening teaser is all of them battling against the foot soldiers and against a monster and all that. And Yakumo's trying to come up with a plan and say, hey, you do this, you do that, and we'll be able to take them out, because there's so many of them. They just can't defeat them, what they have been doing. But Takaharu says, screw that, I'm going to go. And he goes out and defeats all the monsters all by himself. And what's interesting is this is actually a simulation, because as it turns out, the Ninninger have a holodeck. Yes, they have a holodeck or semi-deck or whatever you want to go ahead and call it. Actually, Holoshed is pretty good. But yeah, they have their own simulator here. So I like that aspect of it. But the problem I actually have with this scene is what it says about our character of Takaharu. Because let's forget that it's a simulation for a minute. What this opening scene actually shows is that the other Rangers really don't need the Red Ranger. And here's what I mean. They are having a hard time one-on-one trying to defeat all these villains. And they're trying to come up with a plan to do it. But Takaharu, by himself, with his own initiative, is able to defeat all the enemies basically in one shot. And then as we actually go in later into the episode, they have a few practice simulations that they're doing in which Takaharu is able to basically win every time, and he's able to do it single-handedly by himself. Now, it obviously sets up the dilemma where the Red Ranger thinks he can do everything by himself and he doesn't need the other Rangers, in which, again, he has to learn by the end that he does. But I think what this paints is that Takaharu can do all this by himself. Because he's able to defeat all those enemies, he's able to do all those training exercises. Granted, when we actually get to the battle, he is struggling on his own, but then the other Rangers do show up and help him, and they are able to ultimately defeat him, only after he learns the lesson. But I wonder, if Takaharu was all by himself and he was able to actually fight all the villains, could he succeed by himself? The series would obviously say no, because you need the entire team, but the way that it's so easy for him to go through these trials and these tasks and is able to take out the monsters by himself, even in a simulation, shows that he is the most powerful, the most skilled, and so forth. So why does the team actually need him, or why does he need the rest of the team? Yes, again, teamwork, but it's kind of like saying, think of the Justice League for a second. If you have Superman, yeah, Superman can defeat an entire army by himself, but why does he need the Justice League to really help him? Now, there are those threats that require everybody, but Superman by himself can pretty much handle things. And I think that's the way they're paying Takaharu. Now, Takaharu is not meant to be Superman, I don't think, but it's just kind of a mixed message where I think the message should be is that the Red Ranger can't do it by himself. But by showing that he can do it by himself, I think is sending the wrong message here. That's my ultimate point that I'm trying to go ahead and make. Now, the way he learns it, a little bit unique. I never heard of anybody learning a lesson about teamwork with food. Although I suspect that this might have been a lesson better suited to Wright from Tokyuger, given how Wright loves to eat a lot. But it works in this context. Although I will admit, if the food looked any bit appetizing, then it might have worked better. But I'm just looking at them like, ugh, I don't know what that stuff is. That is precisely the reason I lost 20 pounds in Kyoto, because I could not eat stuff like that. But the way the grandfather does it, I think it's kind of a unique way of doing it. But as I said, that's not enough to really save the episode. Another thing that actually does kind of bother me is, again, we're 4 episodes in. We spent the first episode introducing everybody. And the thing is, I said about Takaharu is that we did not need to know too much about him in the first episode because he's an archetype and we've seen this character before. This episode reinforces that. It is the exact same character. There's no real variation on him. So when we went to the second episode and learned about Yakumo, we got understood his character. Episode 3, we got Nagi. But still, the girls haven't done anything. Fuka, we really haven't gotten to know her very well. Katsumi, we did learn a little bit about her and her relationship to Yakumo and how she's, basically got a poisoned tongue in a way. But I really kind of wish this episode focused on them a little bit, or at least the next few episodes will, because I don't think we needed to learn about Takaharu too much in this. Now, I will say this, though. This almost skipped my mind. The reason Takaharu is doing this is not only does he have this arrogance about him that, again, has been present through the last few episodes, but when he did meet Gabi in the previous episode, he now has this kind of mission that he needs to defeat, and he realizes he's not strong enough. So not only is this arrogance on his part, but he has a goal in mind. Like, I need to become stronger so I can defeat this guy. Now, whether he wants to defeat him based on pride or anything like that is debatable at this time. Nevertheless, I like that there is something of a motivation there that they're trying to say, hey, this is why he's doing that. So I do appreciate that. Let's talk about some other aspects of the story, some things that we're introduced to in this episode. So first of all, the Paonmaru. So the new Zord is introduced here, and I like it. Again, I don't know why they went for the same animal and pretty much a direct color scheme from Geki Ranger, but hey, it looks good. I love that it has an alternate robot form. And am I the only one here that thinks it looks like War Machine with those side cannons? I like that it combines to the Megazord and it has this double axe mode. It's kind of like Double Trouble Paul Bunyan, who knows? So I like the aesthetic. I like the color. I think it's a pretty cool Zord. But let's talk about how it forms and how we are establishing how we're getting new Zords going through. So the ceiling shurikens that we have, as we established, are about 49 of them. And that's what was used to keep the great bad guy hidden away. Now that they are loose, they are turning objects into monsters. And once defeated, they're going to collect the ceiling shurikens. Now, it was my understanding that they would use the ceiling shurikens to actually seal him up at the end of the series, much like, Witch Bandora and a couple of other villains, so forth. That's what they would go ahead and use it for. But as established in the series, they can use the ceiling shurikens to transform into, I guess, Zord shurikens to call upon new Zords and vehicles, probably weapons and other things down the line. Now, that leads me into a few things. First of all, let's talk about them transforming into new Zords. Now, based on the dialogue the grandfather gives, is that he says Paonmaru has returned to its proper form. Meaning that ceiling shuriken was always the elephant somehow, and became a ceiling shuriken to keep the enemy away for 444 years. So it sounds to me that all these shurikens at some point prior were Zords and then converted to keep away, and now we're going back to a true form. Is that the case? And if that's true, that means that our Paonmaru was one of the monsters in the previous episodes. Technically, I'm not really sure about this relationship between the shurikens and what forms that they're taking. Further, it seems to me that based on this plot point, I think probably one of these things, if not both, is going to happen. Either A, they're not going to seal the enemy by the end of the series, they're actually going to destroy him because the sealing shurikens are being used for other things, and of course the question is, are you going to sacrifice your Zords to seal him when you can rather destroy him? Or two, the second thing would be that their Zords get stolen from them and are corrupted, or maybe a fleet of evil Zords are going to be created using these shurikens. Which is something I have to admit is pretty much missing from Sentai and Power Rangers. We really do need more sets of evil Zords. It's always kind of unfair where the Rangers have these giant robots and the monsters just grow large. We're kind of missing that aspect to it. So, I mean, because if they're going to use it as a Zord, then they can't use it as sealing, therefore they have to destroy the enemy, and of course there's always that chance that they can steal the shurikens, return them to their true form, and then use it against the Rangers. Which, another thing, is one of the villains actually used it in the previous episode on the little mallet thing to make a giant monster, in this episode to make the monster grow. So are we to assume that shuriken is always meant to be evil? And it's kind of lucky that they got the evil shuriken as opposed to the Paonmaru shuriken or good guy shuriken. So it's a little bit confusing. I kind of like the uniqueness of this idea, but it's something I think needs to be thought out a little bit further. Plus, there are 48 of them, and I think we've only discovered about 4, one of which is used for Zord, one of which is used for villain. The other 2, we don't know what they're being used for at the minute. Are we to assume that there will be 48 Zords by the end of the series? Because I both love and hate that idea. I love it because I would love to go ahead and have them all and collect them, and I hate it because I'd have to pay for them. So, it's probably not going to go ahead and be the case. I'm sure they'll use the shurikens for other things, but totally, if we could have all those beast batteries and ranger keys, we're probably going to have a lot of shurikens to go ahead and collect. So, nevertheless, I think those are my ultimate thoughts on the episode. I can't think of anything further that I would like to go ahead and say. I'm tired of the plot. I want to see something new. The Zord was okay. It was very interesting. I'm just hoping that in the next episode or next couple of episodes that Fuka and Katsumi will get their time in the spotlight. We'll learn about their characters. Because, again, I still like Fuka. I think she's like... Okay, I say Nagi's probably my favorite character, but that's because I don't know anything about Fuka, but she's the cutest of the 2 girls, I will admit that. And I just want to know more about her. She, again, as I said, she's like the Meg Griffin, she's been picked on in the 2nd episode, but let's see where that takes us now. But again, that's all I have. So, next time we'll be back with Shinobi number 5 and see what the guys get into. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.